Hi everybody, this is Peter Schiff. It is Tuesday, April 3rd, 2012. Well, gold took a beating today, moments after the Fed released the minutes from its most recent FOMC meeting. Gold dropped about $30 by the close. The dollar rose. Bonds and stocks also went south. I think everybody is reading too much into these meetings. Apparently, traders are convinced that the era of cheap money is over because the Federal Reserve did not come out and specifically state that they're about to launch QE3. Now, they're not going to come out and say that. Whether they're intending to do it or not, they're not going to telegraph that intention. The Fed is trying to maintain the illusion that there's no inflation. The last thing they want to do is get the markets anticipating more QE so that they'll bid up oil prices or other prices in anticipation of that, because that'll make it even harder for the Fed to pretend that there is no inflation. So the Fed is not going to show its hand, but you've got to be able to read its cards anyway. If you look at the FOMC minutes, they did not close the door to QE. In fact, they left it wide open. The minutes show that the Fed is prepared to launch QE3 if the economy needs it. They're saying if the economy slows down or if inflation is not high enough, that they are prepared to do QE. They're simply stating that as of today, they don't believe the economy needs it. Now, maybe they're telling the truth, or maybe they're lying. But I know that this phony recovery is going to come to an end, and I'm confident that the only thing the Fed's got is QE3. In fact, Operation Twist is maybe QE 2.0 or 2 light, because what are they doing in Operation Twist? They are buying long-term Treasury bonds. And how is the Fed keeping interest rates at these artificially low levels? They have to be in the markets buying bonds. So that is QE3, whether they call it that or not. But anybody who's reading these minute meetings and coming to the premature and incorrect conclusion that QE3 is off the table is mistaking. But it was that was enough, I guess, to run some stops in the gold market to bid up the dollar. But I think the smart money would be fading this trade. And of course, in the Fed minutes, the Fed is still insisting that there is no inflation, that inflation is not a problem, that inflation expectations are contained. This, again, is an illusion. And in fact, it might even be an outright lie. The Fed may well know that inflation is a huge problem. It just doesn't want to admit it because it doesn't want to have to do anything about it because it knows it can't. If you go back to the housing bubble, if you remember, in 2004, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York actually released a study that it commissioned. And the conclusion of that study was that there was no evidence at all of a housing bubble, even though the housing bubble was 2 years from a top. I mean, it was well into the bubble. The signs of a housing bubble were obvious and everywhere. Yet the Fed was so blind to these signs that even a study couldn't reveal it. Now, at the time, I thought the study was a PR stunt. I wrote that I thought that the Fed was so worried about the housing bubble that they came up with a phony study to try to diffuse the concern. Because if the Fed had acknowledged there was a bubble, they would have to raise rates, and they didn't want to raise rates because they knew their phony recovery was dependent on low rates. And when they eventually did raise rates, I think they raised them very slowly because they were trying their best not to prick that housing bubble. Ben Bernanke, of course, was going on television in 2005 and 2006 telling everybody that there was no housing bubble, that there were no signs of a housing bubble. This is the same guy that is saying that there's no signs of inflation, that inflation is well contained. Well, as far as I'm concerned, either Ben Bernanke was completely incompetent and couldn't see the obvious signs of a housing bubble, or he was lying. But either way, he has no credibility. He's doing the same thing now. Either he's so incompetent he can't see the inflation, or he's lying about it the way he may have lied about the housing bubble. And in fact, the crazy thing is Ben Bernanke has been giving speeches. He was giving these lectures at George Washington University. And Ben Bernanke actually stated that he believes that the Fed's cheap money policies under Greenspan not only didn't they cause the housing bubble, but he claims that the cheap money didn't even contribute to the bubble. Well, first of all, if the Federal Reserve didn't even recognize the bubble, if they couldn't even see it, even though they were right in the middle of it, how do they know? After all, maybe the Fed caused the bubble by accident. Maybe the Fed caused the bubble and doesn't even realize they caused it because they didn't even see it. But here's how you know that Bernanke is lying, because that makes a lot more sense than that he's just completely clueless. Bernanke was saying that interest rates had no effect on home prices. Well, he knows that's not true. If you look at the Fed's stated reasons for QE2 when they did it, and why they're doing Operation Twist, is they're trying to keep interest rates low to influence mortgage rates. And they're trying to keep mortgage rates low to prop up the housing market. Well, that's an admission that low interest rates can prop up home prices. Well, if interest rates had no relation to home prices during the housing bubble, why do they have a relation to them now? If interest rates are keeping home prices from falling or making real estate prices higher than they would be if rates were allowed to rise, then why didn't it have the same effect during the housing bubble? In fact, not only did the Fed's cheap money policies play a role in creating the housing bubble, they played the principal role. Now, I have I completely debunk and refute Bernanke's claims. I don't want to go over them again on this video. All you got to do is go to my Facebook page, Facebook/Peter Schiff. I was down in Washington, D.C. last week, and I sponsored an event or spoke at an event that was sponsored by Reason Magazine and FreedomWorks. And this was my debunking and unspinning the propaganda coming from Ben Bernanke. Several of the students from George Washington University were in attendance, as well as others. But most people were watching on the internet. It was broadcast live. There was a live feed. But if you go to my Facebook page, you can hear my complete debunking or refutation of all the false claims that Ben Bernanke made, not only about the Fed's role in creating the housing bubble, but in the Fed's role of creating the bubble that led to the crash of the stock market in 1929. In fact, Ben Bernanke tried to paint a false picture of the Fed as this benevolent agency, and we're all benefiting from their wise stewardship of monetary policy. The truth is, the Fed has done a lot of damage, particularly under Ben Bernanke and his predecessor, Alan Greenspan. In fact, I think it's ironic, this week, Alan Greenspan actually came to Ben Bernanke's defense. He said that all the criticism of Bernanke by Republican presidential candidates was unfounded, was counterproductive, was wrong. The only criticism I have of presidential candidates who are criticizing Ben Bernanke is they're not criticizing him enough, and they're failing to include Alan Greenspan. He should be criticized too. You know, it's no wonder that Alan Greenspan wants to rush to the defense of his protege. After all, Ben Bernanke is simply taking Barack Obama's failed policies and expanding on them, which unfortunately is exactly what President Obama is doing with Bush's policies, which I guess is a good bridge to my next topic, which is the president's speech. President Obama was out today with, a scathing speech, really taking on the Republicans and Paul Ryan for the budget that Paul Ryan has proposed. And Obama is attacking this budget for the draconian cuts to government spending. There aren't even any cuts. Spending goes up under the Paul Ryan plan. The problem for Obama is that the Ryan plan doesn't increase spending fast enough. He's talking about how the Ryan plan balances the budget on the backs of the poor and the middle class. It doesn't balance the budget at all. I mean, sure, the Ryan plan forecasts a balanced budget in 2040, but 2040, none of those out years mean anything. And of course, they have to rely on the cooperation of future Congresses, which they can't guarantee. And they also have to rely on these pie-in-the-sky rosy economic assumptions that are never going to materialize. So in other words, the Ryan plan doesn't balance the budget. Now, the Obama plan doesn't even pretend balance the budget. At least you can say that the Ryan plan pretends to get to balance at some point in the distant future. But Obama doesn't even bother with the pretense, yet he is criticizing the Republicans for these draconian cuts that don't even exist. In fact, Obama was saying, if we pass the Ryan budget, it's going to destroy the economy. It's going to gut the middle class. It's going to disrupt the recovery. That it's going to be Armageddon, basically, if we have this budget. The truth is, if we don't have this budget, if we pass the president's budget, we're going to have Armageddon because of the government spending. That's what's going to destroy the economy. That's what's going to destroy the dollar. And passing the Ryan budget isn't going to prevent that from happening. It may delay the day of reckoning a bit, but it's not going to stop it. What we need are real cuts in government spending. And that's where you might get frustrated if the Republicans are going to get nailed on this, if they're going to get criticized for cuts, then why not actually propose some real cuts, right? Why not really attack government spending? And then at least if you're going to go down, you're going down for something that's worth fighting for. Why just pretend you're cutting government when you're expanding it and then leave yourself open to attacks from Democrats and the president for huge cuts to government spending that aren't even happening? Anyway, that's it for today. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, pre-order a copy of my brand new book, The Real Crash, America's Coming Bankruptcy, How to Save Yourself and Your Future. This is the most comprehensive book I've written since the original Crash Proof. It is coming out next month in May, but you can pre-order it now on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble. You get a pretty good discount for doing so, and you can help me get that book to the bestseller list early enough so that maybe somebody might actually review it. Take care and bye for now.